Okay, friends, here we are. It's Thursday, and it's after 6:15, so it must be Bible study time. We've been working our way through the life of King David. Just by way of really quick review, just in the last 3 chapters in 2 Samuel, we have seen a recap of the death of King Saul. We have seen David installed as the king over the tribe of Judah. We have seen some kind of heinous action by some of David's supporters, which he dealt with quickly. Abner, the general of Saul's army, in the last chapter came to make peace with David, and when his opponents under David's command found out, they just went ahead and tracked him down and assassinated him, which didn't do anybody any favors, although it did allow David to show anybody who's watching that he had nothing to do with it, that he honored Abner, and that he saw his death as a great tragedy, not as a great opportunity for political gain. And so that sort of brings us right up here to chapter 4. It's a short chapter, just 12 verses. That's all we're going to cover this evening. There's some really interesting stuff going on in this chapter. So let's start in 2 Samuel 4, verse 1, and we'll read down to verse 3 for now. When Ishbosheth, son of Saul, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost courage, and all Israel became alarmed. Now, Saul's son had 2 men who were leaders of raiding bands. One was named Baana, and the other Rechab. They were sons of Rimmon the Beerothite from the tribe of Benjamin. Beeroth is considered part of Benjamin because the people of Beeroth fled to Gittaim and have resided there as foreigners to this day. One moment, please. Joanne is trying to log in, and nothing is happening. Oh, goodness. It's scary.
So were Abner's, your son, Saul's sons could go to bed as
Oh, there's Cody.
Ishbosheth is the son, and he's not so hot.
okay.
Yes, Jonathan.
But he died with Saul, didn't he?
Before Saul.
They were vicious back then too.
There's some Thursdays. There's some Thursdays when you get home from school and go back up. That's all I can do to get there and get there some days.
Okay, so Cody is logged in. He's with us now, and Joanne is trying to make it happen. So we're just going to keep rolling. All right, so here at the beginning of chapter 4, we are back in Israel again. We've moved from Hebron right down there up to kind of the middle there above Gad and south of Manasseh. And there's my other helper. And so Ishbosheth, the king of the remaining tribes of Israel, is ruling from Mahanaim over by the Jabbok River between Manasseh and Gad. And then Hebron is where David is ruling the tribe of Judah and anybody else who will have him. So, when Mephibosheth heard that, not Mephibosheth, that's the wrong one so far. Ishbosheth, sorry. When Ishbosheth, the king of Israel, heard that Abner had been killed in Hebron, he was deeply affected by it. Abner is the major general of the Israelite army. He is the one who installed Ishbosheth as the king over Israel, and now he has been killed. When it says in the New International Version that he lost courage, that phrase is really descriptive in the original language. It literally means that his hands went limp. That phrase appears in several other places in the Old Testament. When people get overly scared or overwhelmed, it says that their hands, they lost courage. Their hands just, they can't move. And Ishbosheth is not the only one who's having this issue. We read there that the rest of Israel is affected that way. All Israel became alarmed. They've got trembling hands. Everybody's either, doing the scarlet thing, whatever am I going to do? Or they're shaking in their boots because there is this big concern. Well, maybe just of the tribes that were faithful to Ishbosheth, maybe David was behind this whole political coup. He's the one who had Abner assassinated. And now that the general is out of the way, David and his men are going to push north. They're going to take over all of the territories that belong to Israel. We're going to have a war on our hands. So it is a reasonable fear that something bad could be on the horizon. And so the next thing that we read about is, let me get back to my Bible here, is about these two men, Baana and Rechab. These two men are leading raiding parties for King Ishbosheth. They are brothers. And a raiding party, if we need to put it into more contemporary language, these are commando units. It's the SEALs, the Green Berets, the Crazy Marines. They're the ones who go in first and come out last and cause all kinds of mayhem. So these two men are the leaders of it. And then we get to verse 4, which is in parentheses in my NIV. Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in both feet. He was 5 years old when news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled, but as she hurried to leave, he fell and became disabled. His name was Mephibosheth. You can see they have the same end of their name, Ishbosheth and Mephibosheth. And I read that verse and go, why is that here?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
This is a very odd little insertion here. It is important information. It's useful information at some point, but maybe not right here at this moment. So what we learn there is that Jonathan had a son who survived. He was a very young boy the day that Saul and Jonathan and the other two sons of Saul were killed in the battle.
Did we read that before, though? That there was a son? Yeah. Or that they were killed? I thought that we knew he had a son before.
We
like young and
we may have talked about it.
Like he's had problems.
Yeah. We may have discussed it, but I don't remember that it was in the text. The guy leading the Bible study may have been going farther down the road than he was supposed to.
It's stuck with me,
Yeah.
so I just remember maybe this in parentheses is a reminder.
Well, it is kind of like a little aside, like, oh, and by the way, you should know this. Keep this in mind for later on. You're going to want to know this. Kind
Jonathan had a
of thing
son.
movie. So Jonathan had a son. He survived. And so what would that have meant? King Saul has a son, Jonathan, probably the crown prince who has a son. What does that mean for Mephibosheth?
Would have been king.
Eventually, he would be on the throne.
Oh.
I think maybe that's the reason that this is included here, just to let us know that there was somebody on the throne of Israel, but there could have been somebody else very different. Okay, so Mephibosheth was about 5 years old when his dad was killed in the battle. And that day, when the royal nurse, the attendant to the prince, when she got the news that Jonathan had been killed, she, and I'm assuming anybody else in the house, got everything all collected up and tried to head for someplace safe. Because if the king and his sons had been killed, how long is it going to be before they storm the palace here and take the rest of us out? So the nurse scoops up the 5-year-old son. They take off. In my movie version of this, she trips over Legos or Matchbox cars, probably Nerf guns, and as she trips, she falls, and the boy falls, and he is pretty significantly hurt. Physically, yeah. At this point in the story, I think that he can't be more than about 7 or 8, because we read that Ishbosheth reigned for 2 years, and we're about to see the end of Ishbosheth's reign.
So he was 5 when Saul
So,
and Jonathan.
one of the scholars that I was reading today said, well, he's 12 when this takes place. Like, I'm not sure that math works for me. I think he has to be like 7 or 8 in chapter 4.
He was 5 when she picked him up.
Yeah. In 2 Samuel 2.
No, he was 5 when.
Yeah, she picked him up.
No. Oh yeah.
On the day that Jonathan and Saul died, Mephibosheth is 5 years old.
Yeah.
That's when he was injured.
Okay.
In the
he's
fall.
5. Okay.
It is.
That makes any big deal, but.
Ishbosheth became the king when he was 40-ish, and that he reigned for 2 years. So if he reigned for 2 years, I think that this little boy is still like a second grader. Okay. We also learn here in this one big verse that Mephibosheth, whose name means something like idol buster, idol smasher, it's kind of a cool name actually, that he suffered in an accident that day. When they fell, either his legs were broken and they were never set the right way, both of his legs or feet. Maybe it was a back injury or a neck injury that paralyzed his feet and legs somehow. We don't really know, but the word is that he became disabled. Some translations have the word smitten, it was smote. And he became lame in his feet. Literally, it says something like he fell and was made to become limping. The word can mean maimed. So whatever happened, it was a pretty serious, significant injury, and he was this way for the rest of his life. He was never able to walk.
Is this important in the story?
It will be important in the story,
Okay.
in a few chapters,
Okay.
which is why they put it here. So, like,
Okay.
you know, it's like when you've seen a movie with somebody on your own, and then you go see it with somebody else and go, now pay attention to this part right here. This is really important.
Gotcha.
This is that whisper. This is really important. Remember this, what's going on right here.
Okay, we got you.
All right. Again, I think the fact that he could have been heir to the throne has to be the reason that this verse is included right here. but we're going to read some more about Mephibosheth in a little while.
I'm glad you can say that.
It's fun to say. Let's read verses 5 to 8. Now, Rechab and Baanah, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, set out for the house of Ishbosheth. Who do they work for? They work for King Ishbosheth. Okay, so they are heading to his house. They arrived there in the heat of the day while he was taking his noonday rest. They went into the inner part of the house as if to get some wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and his brother Baanah slipped away. They had gone into the house while he was lying on the bed in his bedroom, and they stabbed him and killed him. They cut off his head. Taking it with them, they traveled all night by way of the Arabah. Okay, so intrigue and disaster are taking place in Israel. So these two brothers, Baanah and Rechab, mercenaries, commando squad leaders, they just seem to decide that they're going to take matters into their own hands. And their boss, King Ishbosheth, has no idea what kind of trouble he's in, because it's the middle of the afternoon, it's the heat of the day. He goes in after lunch to lay down and to rest for a little while. And while the king is napping in his chambers, these two brothers, I'm sure, face black and, skull caps and, the whole not night vision, but the whole deal. That's how it would be in SEAL Team 6. They sneak into the house. They go into his royal bedchamber and they assassinate their own king. And like Asahel and Abner, the king of Israel is stabbed in the stomach. The word means below the fifth rib, which I think I have ribs. I haven't felt them for a long time, but I'm pretty sure that they're there someplace. That's a mortal wound.
Okay.
Right in the guts, and the
So
king
there's a
is dead.
significance of where they stabbed him.
They just make sure you know that apparently it was quick and it was deadly and it wasn't an accident. They didn't accidentally happen to fall on top of him.
With a knife, with this,
Yeah.
and stab him.
Whoops.
Dang it.
And so not only do they stab
Yeah,
him,
cut off his head.
but once he's dead, they take his head off, and they take his head with them as a trophy and as evidence. And Scripture says that they slip away undetected, and they make their way into the Arabah Valley, where there's not going to be a lot of traffic, and they're going all night long, getting away as fast as they can, because they are headed for Hebron. They want to find David. Okay, any questions or comments from anybody at this point?
Fine fellows.
Pretty bloody and gory.
What is it with cutting off the heads of everybody?
You had to prove it.
Okay, well,
Is that what it was? They had to prove it that they had
He
done
was
it?
dead.
so when they get to
I don't
David,
know, I just found it on the road.
when they get to King David in Hebron, they give a rationale for their actions. The verse says, here is the head of Ishbosheth. This is verse 8. Here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy who tried to kill you. Saul did, not Ishbosheth. This day the Lord has avenged my lord the king against Saul and his offspring. So what motivated these two men? Maybe it is their incredibly white hot, scaldingly inflammatory patriotism. They love Israel. And so they want to bring all 12 tribes together again under one king, the way that it should be. You know, we might have labels for those kind of guys now. It's like ultra nationalism. They want to go back to the way that God said that it should be, that the king would rule over all the tribes. Maybe that's it. Maybe they have a great love for David, and so they want to try to satisfy vengeance for him. You know, they knew everything that Saul did to try to kill David, and so, you know, they're paying Saul's heirs back. Maybe it's that they have just extreme frustration with King Ishbosheth, that he is just so weak and so ineffective. You know, that's probably how I would play it in my movie version, is that these two psycho military wackos who love their country more than life itself, that they just cannot abide with this weak, limp, do nothing king. He has no business being there. They're going to get rid of him because David, he is a general, he is a warrior, he is a war hero. That's my kind of king. Maybe that's what's going on. Or maybe they're just trying to find some new positions in the new administration. And guess what? We offed the opposition, so can you make us the commander of the army? Can you make us, you know, Secretary of Defense? I think it's interesting that they throw in there, the Lord has avenged my Lord the King. That they feel like they have been a tool used by God to bring this thing about. They know that David has been anointed to be the king, and so they're just removing obstacles. I don't know if it is any of those things or not, but it would seem like those are some real distinct possibilities, and probably more than one at the same time. And so they are standing like super proud. They got this bag swinging back and forth. You know, look what we got. He's going to be so good to us. I cannot wait to see how this goes. It's going to be great. And that takes us to verse 9. David answered Rechab and his brother Baanah, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, as surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble. When someone told me Saul is dead and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and put him to death in Ziklag. That was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed, should I not now demand his blood from your hand and rid the earth of you? Okay, so the king has the assassins still, you know, in their camo and goggles, blood on their hands. He lets them know exactly how he feels. He says, first of all, the Lord has delivered me out of every trouble. Not mercenaries, not assassins, not Amalekite, who was the last guy that got killed for killing a king. Not a Philistine, not anybody else. The Lord is the deliverer. David is making it very clear that he is following God's plan. He is the anointed one, and the Lord is the one who brings success or victory, not anybody else. Okay? And then he says, the last clown who delivered good news, air quotes there, who delivered good news about Saul's death, ended up dead. He expected a reward, and instead he got an execution for, in that point, for killing the Lord's anointed king. Now, no place in chapter 4 do the assassins or David refer to Ishbosheth as the king or as the Lord's anointed. Okay? I hadn't paid attention to that until I got almost all the way done with everything. David does call him, though, an innocent man. It's actually, the word is righteous. That Ishbosheth was a righteous man, and that he was murdered in the middle of the heat of the day, in his own house, in his own bed.
Wasn't in battle.
Yeah, it's not in battle. There's no honor in this. There's nothing noble about what they've done. There is no victory. You know, you die in battle, especially if you're Klingon. It's every day is a good day to die in battle. That's not what happened here. These guys feel like they've, huh?
He was just in his house taking a nap, and they went in and murdered him.
How brave do you have to be to kill a guy while he's asleep? Not very.
How brave do you have to be to cut off his head after you cut off? Way different. Yeah.
And one of the last things that he says in his speech to these jokers is that bloodshed will demand bloodshed.
Now, wait.
They killed Ishbosheth. So, in the words of Ron White, we will kill you back. I don't know if you've heard that bit. That's one of my favorite sayings. It's one of the funniest things that he says. Anyway, his deal is, in Texas, if you kill somebody, we will kill you back. And that's kind of what happens right here with David. You killed an innocent man in his sleep. We will kill you right back. I think one of the things that David's trying to get across to these two and everybody who's watching is that his administration, his reign as the king, is not going to be achieved through bloodshed and violence.
But he had them killed.
Yes, because he is the king and he has the power to make that decision.
But there's bloodshed and violence again.
No, there's a difference. What he's giving is justice. They killed an unarmed, innocent man in his home, in his bed. If they had killed him in battle, they wouldn't be in trouble. But they killed an innocent man without any kind of honor.
So they got the death penalty.
I guess immediately, if not sooner.
Who put God on the throne?
Who put God on the
Or
throne?
who put David on the throne?
God.
God put him on the throne. I'm answering my own question the wrong way. God put David on the throne, not political intrigue and spies and clandestine black ops. That's not the way that David became king. It wasn't the way that David was going to reign as the king.
But I just can't see that what David did was right. If he's the king, I can't see that he's saying, you killed, I understand that these two guys are not the good guys. They killed somebody in their sleep for no reason. But David's having them killed?
Well, it's like a judge has.
It's capital punishment.
Okay.
You killed an innocent man.
So we're gonna kill you.
It was with malice aforethought. It was not involuntary manslaughter. It was premeditated murder, execution style.
I first agree.
We're ordered, and he has to set an example.
I think that's a part of it as well. I think the law that he is laying down is this nation, God's people, are not going to be bloodthirsty, violent people who achieve every end that they want through murder and assassination.
doing
we
it.
will come down with the full weight of justice and God's righteousness on anybody who kills the innocents.
And they admitted it, so they're guilty.
Yeah, it's not like they're trying to hide it. It's like, oh, we done did, huh? Yeah, it's right there.
Okay, it just seems weird to me.
Wicked acts deserve swift, severe punishment.
And I can understand making the example and saying, okay, you guys, this is not the way we work. This is not how we do things. So I'm gonna kill these two guys that killed this innocent guy.
Okay, so here's the interesting thing. We look back and we see that poor dumb Amalekite guy who was at the battle at Mount Gilboa, who was right there beside King Saul, saw him fall on his sword, and then he said, well, I'm just going to go ahead and finish the job, and killed him. He came to David looking for whatever, for freedom or for a reward or whatever, and David said, you raised your hand against God's anointed king, and because of that, you should die. Here, you have two men who, maybe even with the best of Israel's best intentions at heart, we want to save our country, but they killed an innocent man in his sleep. And the punishment is the death penalty. But a chapter ago, David's own general, Joab, hunted down a man with whom David had made peace and forgiven. Abner was murdered, and David didn't do anything to Joab.
Because of who his mother was.
Family stuff got in the way. I wish David could have done something about Joab, because he's going to be a pain for several chapters.
Tell Cody, thank you for not coming to Bible study with that crowd, by the way.
Cody, Susan's very glad you're not here. So is Cody.
Good. I mean, if David's king and was given that position that he was given, I just can't see. These other guys said they did it in the Lord's name, and now he's doing this. That's just, I'm just having trouble with an eye for an eye. And I know it's different times and different ways of thinking, but.
But see, the difference is that if they had, what these two guys tried to do was outside of even that culture's rules. Okay? If you kill somebody in battle,
Oh, I understand that part.
you're just dead in battle. Nobody gets to come back and say, I'm going to kill you for killing my brother or my cousin or my dad or my son. There is something called the Goel, the blood avenger, all throughout the Old Testament. If somebody in your family is killed, your family has the right to pursue that killer and to seek justice, to have a trial, to see what the verdict is, guilty or innocent. The Goel has the right to pursue those people unless they end up in a refuge city, a sanctuary city like Hebron was. Okay, those two men are trying to do that for David. They are killing the family of the man who tried to kill David.
I have a comment.
Yes, Cody.
It says, thus the Lord has given my Lord the King vengeance this day on Saul and his descendants. So they were usurping the Lord's authority to kill Ishbosheth.
Right. We talked about that the last time we were together, that the verse says vengeance is mine, says the Lord, is mine to repay. It seems like they view themselves as mighty tools in God's hands. Well, kind of like I would like to. I work for the Lord, so I will be his instrument of vengeance.
But that would just make it worse in David's eyes.
Yeah. Yes, taking on the Lord's position.
Must be 7.
It's not their job. It's not something that they should have done. So like Abner and Joab, Joab was coming after Abner to kill him, to get revenge for Asahel's death. But that was in a battle. That was in an active open war that happened. Joab shouldn't have gone after Abner. It's war. It's what happens. Now, if they'd been walking down the middle of the street and Abner came along and stabbed Asahel in the stomach and killed him, that's a whole different situation. The law allows Joab or Abishai to go after the killer of their brother. And it is not exactly the way that things work here. Probably if things did work like this, it'd be interesting to know what the effects would be on society. If there'd be more or less violence and bloodshed.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Verse 12. So David gave an order to his men, and they killed them. They cut off their hands and feet and hung the bodies by the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in Abner's tomb at Hebron. Okay, so King of Judah, as the chief magistrate in the land, the highest governing authority, gives the sentence, death. And just like that, it is executed. The assassins are killed by David's men, and David uses a phrase up there at the end of verse 11, rid the earth of you. So there is a rule in the Old Testament that the execution of the murderer of an innocent person, would purge the evil from the land. So somebody kills me. I'm a righteous guy. I've done nothing wrong. Mind my own business. So until my murderer is captured and tried and the sentence is carried out, there is like I guess sort of a curse. There is this unresolved evil in the land. The Old Testament allowed for the execution of the murderer to remove the present evil from the land, which is why David uses that language. There's a couple passages we could look at. We've got a little time here. So Deuteronomy 19. So you're going to go back to the left in your Bible. Deuteronomy 19, verse 13. Actually, we can go up a little bit higher. We'll go up to verse 11. Deuteronomy 19:11. Are you there? Did you find it? But if out of hate someone lies in wait, premeditation, assaults and kills a neighbor, and then flees to one of these cities, the refuge cities, the killer shall be sent for by the town elders, be brought back from the city, and be handed over to the avenger of blood, to Goel, to die. Show no pity. You must purge from Israel the guilt of shedding innocent blood, so that it may go well with you. And a little bit later, down in verse 19, it's talking about purging the evil. If somebody gives false testimony due to the false witness, as that witness intended to do to the other party, you must purge the evil from among you. God's people are to be holy and to be righteous, to be following his law, being obedient to him, and there is no room in God's people for that sort of hatred and violence. It's got to be dealt with, because if it isn't, it can spread. Okay, one other passage, we're going to go to Numbers, which is before Deuteronomy, the first book right in front of it. Numbers chapter 35, which is nearly the end. Just for grins, we'll start in verse 30. Anyone who kills a person is to be put to death as a murderer only on the testimony of witnesses. Somebody has to have seen it. But no one is to be put to death on the testimony of only one witness. That seems like a good plan. Do not accept a ransom for the life of a murderer who deserves to die. They are to be put to death. Do not accept a ransom for anyone who has fled to a city of refuge, and so allow them to go back and live on their own land before the death of the high priest. Do not pollute the land where you are. Bloodshed pollutes the land, and atonement cannot be made for the land on which blood has been shed, except by the blood of the one who shed it. Do not defile the land where you live and where I dwell, for I, the Lord, dwell among the Israelites. Okay, now, I don't know if that helps us understand anything more clearly. God has said, at least 400 years before the time of David, that the expectation is that murder is wrong. Do not kill your fellow Israelites. Don't lie in wait. Don't plan it out. Don't kill someone. That is wicked. It is evil. It is unholy. It is impure. It is unrighteous. And because Israel is the land of God's people, and he dwells in the middle of those people, that kind of evil cannot be allowed. And then in this last piece we read that the only thing that can remove the stain of bloodshed, the guilt of bloodshed from the land is what?
Bloodshed.
Of whom?
Blood of the one who shed it.
The blood of the murderer. Yeah. So you think about any murder case in the last 250 years of American history, there is no plea bargain. There is no life without parole. There are no consecutive life sentences. If you kill somebody, the expectation from Old Testament law is you will die, and that is the only way to remove the guilt from the land. Because God is holy, the nation is holy, the people are holy. That kind of violence and hatred cannot be tolerated and won't be. Divine swift retribution. As my wife says at least once a week, if the consequences of sin were immediate, there'd be a lot less sin.
Yes.
Maybe. Okay, so did we actually read verse 12?
We did.
We did. Okay, so, right, we're in those passages. So, to punish these men, not only were they killed, but to further...
Make his point.
Sure, excellent. To drive home the message, we're not putting up with this kind of behavior. The hands and the feet of both of these men are cut off. The hands are cut off because that's how the crime was committed. Their hands are guilty. They've got blood on them. The feet are cut off because they carried the bad news all the way to Hebron. And so these dead assassins
Not what they deserve.
Lucky and Stumpy are serving as a sign of what will happen in David's kingdom to anyone who acts wickedly.
So Hebron's
Unless you're a
a,
family member.
so Hebron's a city that is,
It is a city of refuge.
okay, so they could go there and be safe?
Someone who had killed someone else accidentally could go to Hebron or one of the other
Accidentally
6
is the
cities
word there.
and be safe until a trial.
Okay,
So I suppose if people are wanting to strain gnats and swallow camels here, that standing before David, they confessed to the act, they didn't deny it, he found them guilty, and the sentence was issued immediately. And I suppose because he is the husband of Saul's daughter, so he's brother-in-law to Ishbosheth. Yeah, he's the brother-in-law to Ishbosheth. I suppose he actually could be acting as the avenger of blood because Ishbosheth was innocent. Whew! All right, and so what do we do with Ishbosheth? They take his head and they bury it in the tomb with General Abner's body right there in Hebron. And in doing that, I think David is continuing to try to make the point that, first of all, he is not going to put up with this kind of violent crime. That sort of action is abhorrent to him. He will not tolerate it. Number 2, again, as with Abner's death, David personally had nothing to do with this murder. This was all in these 2 guys. And number 3, David would not hesitate to fulfill his God-given duties as the chief and sole ruler of Israel. He's the highest law of the land. I wish he had used it against Joab. There's probably a sermon series in that one right there. Okay, so just so you know, as far as the timeline goes, this event probably occurs sometime around 1003 BC. So 10 centuries before Christ. 4 centuries more or less after Moses. They've been in the land for 360 years.
they did a timeline up in Idaho at the church and they had it along the wall. It was really interesting to see the years between and how many years and the length of time, as we know time, between all this stuff.
So is there anything that you personally take out of this bloodthirsty, nasty chapter of 2 Samuel? Is there any lesson that you think you should learn or that we ought to pay attention to?
Just what you said about vengeance being the Lord's. We need to make sure we let him avenge.
Let God sort it all out. Let him handle it. I think you have to see that lesson here in 2 Samuel. So many angry, violent
See the
people.
punishment against them 2 white guys.
Anything else grab you?
Just how it's all becoming to, how it's all gathering. All of this stuff is gathering to David to be king. These guys that are killing.
And the thing is that it all would have come about anyway because that's what God wanted,
Yeah.
not necessarily through these actions. I do, the whole deal in the last 2 chapters about Joab really gets me. I wish David had been whatever enough to deal with Joab as I sort of think that God would have wanted him to, according to the law. But he did not.
Joab is not your favorite?
Joab is not my favorite. I believe he is the military guy in the movie that uses his power to intimidate, manipulate, control. He's not there to protect and to serve. I think he is there to control and to have power.
His brother killed
I could be
Abner,
all
right?
wrong. I don't think so.
Maybe Joab shaming Joab was worse for him than death. Just
Maybe.
wear that shame the rest of his life.
Maybe. Well, when we get together again, it won't be next week because next Thursday is
Turkey Day.
Thanksgiving. So we won't have a Bible study next week, but we will pick up again on the 31st of November.
Where'd this year go?
And you're all just going to let that go. There is no 31st of November.
30 days,
only
that's
30.
September, April, June, and
So
November. Wrong?
2 weeks. So, all right, I'm going to shut down our deal here. Be sure to go back and pick up anything that you may have missed that's available here on the YouTube channel. Thanks for coming.
Bye, Cody.
When I was home.